everyone, and welcome to the No More Week 2024 Tech Conference, Silicon Saviors Digital Threats, Exploring Tech's Impact on Domestic and Sexual Violence. The session is going to reflect on the impact of tech abuse on societies throughout Africa. Now, before we begin, I'd like to go over some general housekeeping, guys. So the content of the session may be triggering for some. And if you'd like to reach out for support, you'll find a link to the chat's No More Global Directory, a director, specialist, domestic abuse and sexual violence services. Now, if you have questions for our guest speakers today, please type them to the Q&A box. We'll address as many questions as possible towards the end of the session. Now, thank you for your cooperation, and we hope you enjoyed today's session, and we're all going to learn something after this session. Now, just so you know that you are joining a unique discussion where No More is sharing a problem that is affecting us all today, globally. Now, the long international conference and the sessions focused on several countries exploring the linkage between technology and violence against women across the African continent. We'll be examining unique strategies and prevention schemes being adopted in our various nations. Now, in recent years, there's been an expansion of digital technology in Africa, and it has brought numerous benefits, enhancing communication, education, and business opportunities. However, there's a real divide on the cost and access to data, as well as the fact that digital revolution has also given a rise to concerning trend, the surge of tech-facilitated abuse, which includes a range of malicious activities such as cyberbullying. I have experienced that firsthand. Online harassment, digital identity theft. I have experienced that too firsthand. I'm still actually in court with somebody who used my identity to sell slimming products, and I didn't even know anything about it. And then the privacy violations and abuse. With this, I would like to introduce the panelists who will help us explore the phenomenon and also look at strategic ways to address this, which can be implemented in other countries too. Now, I would like to quickly introduce the speakers. Okay, my name is Jocelyn Duma. I'm an actress and a TV host, as well as a humanitarian from Ghana, and I'll be your moderator for today. It's an honor. And I would like to move on to the next, our first speaker. I'll be very brief with the introduction. Irene Mwenda, she's Executive Director, Policy. Ora Oluwa Lessie, she's a founder and Executive Director of the Women's Technology Empowerment Center in Nigeria. The next panelist is Siri Cynthia Wakuna. She's a Program Director for Mother of Hope in Cameroon. We have Abbas Hamza, who's a founder and creative director of No More in Ghana. And then we have Pamela Zabala, who's a CEO for the No More Foundation. Now, my first question, how does tech abuse impact vulnerable people you work with daily? And what are the survivors telling you? Miss Lessie from Nigeria to answer this question. I'm sorry, can you please help me pronounce your name properly? I just don't want to make any mistakes.
No, that's fine. So my name is Orelua. My first name Orelua, and my last name is Leshy. Yes. So you can say Ore for short.
Ore, I like Ore.
All right, so it's a pleasure to be here. And so I can talk a little bit about what do I do. So I run a nonprofit, and we're working to create and nurture the next generation of female technology builders, entrepreneurs, and leaders. And we do that through a number of programs, including residential camps, STEM camps, and also after-school clubs. So a lot of our work is with girls and young women 18 and below, and also between the ages of 18 to 25. So, I mean, we've definitely seen a lot, especially in the years that we have been running. probably about 15, 16 years ago, when we were showing young women about the power of technology and sharing with them how they could get online, how they could open accounts, and basically the benefits of being online. We had a lot of pushback from the parents, and I guess understandably so, because they were very concerned about the safety and the security of their daughters. We've all heard, and many of us have experienced different forms of harassment online. It could be stalking, identity theft, like, you know, you mentioned you've experienced, Jocelyn, pornography. I mean, there's really a lot. But I mean, our approach is, so number one, we make sure that anyone we're introducing to digital tools is of the appropriate age, especially for that tool. But then we come from the angle of actually the benefits of the tools. But really, it's really important that the young women are able to use these tools safely and confidently, because these tools are all around. We had parents who did not want their daughters to learn about, you know, the internet, to create an email address, you know, as simple as that, even creating a blog to share their own stories. But these tools are ubiquitous. So it is important, I think, you know, for young people to learn how to use them safely. And especially women, because women tend to face more abuse. We have a lot of stats. Not so many stats from Nigeria, because the reporting rate is very low. But we have a report that was released by the Nigerian Demographic and Health Survey that shows 33% of women aged 15 to 49 had experienced some kind of violence. And then when you look at the fact that women are a minority online, and the online space reflects our society offline, and especially in a society that basically trivializes issues of gender-based violence, these feelings also translate online. So you have a lot of interactions online by women and girls. They are really self-censoring. A lot of them will not be as engaged or share the opinions that they would ordinarily do on, offline, because they don't want to be victims of these kinds of attacks. So these are some of the kinds of things that we are seeing.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for this contribution. And I'd like to commend you for what you're doing when it comes to STEM, especially with young girls on our continent, because it's something that it's not as prevalent as I would have wished it to be. So that's great. And then obviously you're teaching them the tools to use, whether it's in a negative light or in a positive light. So that's really good. Thank you. I would like to know how tech abuse impacts vulnerable people that you work with daily, and what are the survivors telling you?
I would like to answer this question in two folds, because the context in which I work in is predominantly women and vulnerable girls in rural communities. And then on the other side, my context is also conflict sensitive. So we've been in a conflict context. There's been an ongoing war in between the speaking regions of Cameroon, where we work predominantly. And then we have the girls and the women in the rural communities we've been working with prior to the conflict. And tech-facilitated abuse affects women generally, women and girls generally. But in my line of work, I've come to realize that the impacts differ based on context, based on status, based on experience. And I'll take the practical example of the girls, young women we work with in the communities. And what we do really predominantly at Mother of Hope Cameroon is that we try to empower adolescent girls and young women to be able to, you know, have access to technology, use digital spaces. And for example, just back in 2013 or so, it was the first time that one of them was ever seeing a computer. Now they get a smartphone, now they're into the tech, now they're on social media. And a girl just wants to be a girl, you know, she just wants to post her pictures and feel comfortable like others are doing. Right. And then she gets bullied online, and then she has people harassing her and sending her nudes and trying to lure her into some kind of sexual relationship, and she doesn't know who these people are. Now she loses her self-confidence. She doesn't want to be on that space where she feels very insecure. First of all, sexual and reproductive health rights is something they're still trying to adapt. Sex conversations around sex is something they're still trying to comprehend based on the context that she lives in the rural community. And then all of a sudden she's exposed to this kind of abuse where somebody is sending nudes to her on Facebook, on Instagram, and is trying to, sending her, sexual messages.
Yeah.
So they come to us with these kind of complaints, and this girl is devastated and she's demoralized.
Yeah.
And the annoying thing is that we don't know the face behind this person. So what tech does is that it gives people power, the kind of gives people access into your lives, and then it gives them power to be able to manipulate and toy with your emotions. And you don't know them, and you can't track them, and you don't know how to go about it. So it plays on their self-confidence, it plays on their ability to be able to share their opinions and to use the spaces that other young people are using, to be able to express their opinions on issues and trending issues. So the next logical thing is to sign off, delete her account, and just not want to go back there anymore.
Right.
Then we have the women who live with their husbands or with their partners, and how men are using technology, digital cell phones to be able to track their wives. A woman will come with a complaint like, oh, my husband is checking my text messages. My partner wants to know where I'm going to. He's checking my status. He's checking who I'm talking to. He's restricting me from talking to my friends. He wants to know who is calling. And then at some point, when he feels that he doesn't have the power anymore to track, then he takes her cell phone away from her, and she's no longer able to communicate. So these are the ways, and then it leaves the woman powerless, And then what the abuser does is that he takes away your phone and leaves you in a vulnerable situation where you're not able to call for help. Now that you're able to get some kind of support system, or to even talk to somebody about how you feel, eliminating every kind of support around you. And then on the other side, we have the women who are fighting in humanitarian context to be able to provide, psychosocial support, to be able to provide food, to be able to provide shelter, sanitation parts for women who have been affected by conflict. And then these women who are the front line of trying to address issues of the conflict that are affecting women and girls get threatened on social media. Their pictures are put up and they are tagged. They will tag your family, we'll find your family, we are coming from you, you're a black leg. Women are supposed to be in their homes. We run after your husband. Sometimes they go as digging dirt about you and bring it on social media just to water you down. And there's a saying that the internet never forgets. The internet never forgets anything. Yeah. So they would dig dirt, whether true or not, just to to demoralize and to take you off that position of power that they think that you're gaining. So these are the kind of things that we see in our context, which is really, I call it's not even double-fold, it's threefold, because now you have these different women experiencing the impact of tech-related violence in different ways based on their context and their reality. So I want to leave it at this point.
Now, Cynthia, quickly, when you go on social media, whether you are the girl who just discovered a phone or herself, or whether you're the activist working with social media to sort of promote, whatever yourself, could it be also based on the kind of information you share out there? I mean, what about that? How does that impact these women, especially? Because when you sign up for these things, you put yourself out there, basically. Now, the kind of information you share is what people are actually going to use as ammunition to also fight you. Now, what are we doing about that part of the whole social media scope?
Well, I think what we also do at the level of trying to address issues like this is to be able to educate women on how to use the spaces. Because that's another thing. It's the knowledge, it's the skill to be able to navigate social media, to be able to know what to post, maybe to coin your language, and what kind of audience are you attracting. These are some of the trainings that we are giving to women to be able to. But something interesting, Jocelyn, is that perpetrators of violence never really care if you're sending out positive or negative information. They would find ways to twat and tweak what you're saying to suit the attack that they bring on you. So it doesn't really matter if you're genuine or what kind of content you're putting out. You could just be a girl who's putting an innocent picture, as well as you can be an advocate who is very vocal about your stance, depending on what you stand for. But abusers always find a way to want to counteract what you're saying and to get you off your position of power. Because when you have an avenue to express yourself, that you're in a position of power, you can be heard, and we just want to be able to, to destabilize you.
It's important to let the women know that it's not their fault. That's really what I'm trying to get at. But thank you, Cynthia. So what are some of the social media trends you're observing being in the Ghana social media space? I mean, I'm also in the Ghana social media space, but I wanted to to know what some of the trends are and how it's affecting women and girls when it comes to abuse.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. I think one of the things that you agree with me is cyberbullying.
Yeah.
Women are often faced with targeted harassment, verbal abuses, and stress online, which is impacting their mental health and well-being and perpetuating all forms of violence. I think I just explained about the observation of non-consensual intimate image sharing. We call revenge porn. Yeah. So this often happens between partners without the knowledge of the other partner, and is mostly against girls and women. We've seen cases in Tamale where a guy takes such pictures or videos and use it to threaten or even blackmail the partner thereafter. Then online harassment, I was talking about women engaged in public spaces, whether professionally or personally. You agree with me how there are trending advertisement, people talking about issues on TikTok and all sorts of social media. And people troll, stalk others, and sometimes issue stress against women. And one of the very practical experience we had somewhere in 2021 was we have this our safe spaces program where we impart skills in SRHR, life skills, and girls get academic work. So post-COVID, we had not moved back fully into in-person meetings yet. So we observed that those girls that were meeting online, one of them I observed, she was consistently reducing in weight.
Wow.
Then I followed up and I found out that it was just a mere comment. She posted a picture online and someone used some of this imaging software to say this is how she will look like next year or by the time COVID is over. And because of that, she refused eating. She was doing a lot of things to herself. So this is one form of online harassment that we are observing, that technology is competing against women.
Yeah. Okay. Now, thank you for this contribution. I'll come back to you in a few, but I just want to go to Ore. I hope I got the name right.
Yes, you did.
Great. Ore, what challenges do some of the survivors face in recovery, and how does tech help? You know, you heard about what Abbas just said with the girls in the northern region of Ghana. You know, the same tech is posing a problem, but we want to know what challenges the survivors face, and how does tech help in their recovery?
All right.
Or how can tech help in their recovery? Yeah.
Okay, so I believe it was Cynthia who said the internet never forgets. So the remnants of the abuse, the harassment are still out there and they continue to be out there. It's very difficult to remove them. In the case of, for instance, revenge porn, or sharing of non-consensual sharing of intimate images, it's out there. I mean, we have regulation here in Nigeria, though they're insufficient and they cover different aspects of online violence. Some target violence, but haven't caught up to the technology. Some are broad enough that they can be used to prosecute online perpetrators of online violence. But then at the same time, it's number one, it's very difficult for victims to know what to do. They're very unclear reporting mechanisms. So this has happened to me. Who do I tell? In many cases, of course, the woman or the girl who has experienced this feels a lot of shame and won't necessarily want to share it. So she may just be suffering. So like, Abbas mentioned in his example, she may just be suffering silently, but not wanting to share it out of shame. But let's say that, she does share it with a trusted friend or family member. Knowing what to do is always the next thing. Who do I report it to? Do I report it to the police? Is there a website? Is there a hotline? In Nigeria, the police have received a lot of training. There are a lot of civil society organizations who have invested in trainings for the police. And there are more campaigns about what to do when this happens. But then at the same time, this is rooted in a society that is essentially patriarchal. So there could be a lot of disbelief, or what was it that you did? What did you put out there that led to this? Or maybe you are the one who shared the picture. You are the one who consented to this act and the video, So in essence, you don't deserve any kind of remedy, basically. So there is that, the lack of being able to do anything about it. So that leads to a feeling of powerlessness. And then the ability to be able to pursue any kind of legal justice. But we do have some examples here in Nigeria where the victims have been able to take their perpetrators to court. And this is when you can identify who the perpetrator is. Many cases, it's a nameless, faceless, anonymous person online. But in the case, for instance, with revenge porn, when you can identify who the person is, we do have a few cases where the perpetrator has been convicted and basically, sentenced to prison. I mean, at the end of the day, I would not say that is total vindication, because there's still, especially here, especially for a woman or a girl, the shame that comes with having gone through that. So I think accompanying that, there needs to be therapy. And avenues to know that it's not your fault. The same way we will speak with rape victims, that it's not your fault. It's not about you are wearing this or wearing that. So you
did nothing wrong.
You did nothing wrong. Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Ore. Thank you so much. This is quite refreshing to know that some of these perpetrators, justice is being served somewhat. Like you said, it's not particularly justice end to end, but at least you get some satisfaction knowing that this person is not going to have the chance to do it to somebody else, but yeah, that's really good. Now, Irene, tell me, what digital resilience mean to women in Uganda, and is data poverty real?
Wow, thank you for that question, and thank you very much to my fellow speakers who've started this conversation before me with very rich experiences of their regions. And I'll be speaking from a regional perspective, not just Uganda, because I work for policy with Double L, and we work on the intersections of technology and data from a feminist perspective. We've been able to interrogate the power of data science and digital skills in improving women's livelihood. Through our research and feminist research, really, we've been able to see that there has been a huge survivor-led or survivor-based support and cause, just as this tech conference is about. However, we've also managed to critique ourselves and ask ourselves questions on why are perpetrators doing what they do? Why is it so easy for them? This way we'll be able to also address the nuts, we'll be able to address the nuts and bolts, on how governments, platforms, and the society can be accountable to ensure that perpetrators do not continue harming women and other minority groups online. What we found in at least 5 of our research is that violence is political. What do I mean by this? I mean that look at the election season, 2024 super election year. I was avoiding to say that, but we all know this by now. Look at things to do with the pandemic, and then the current economic recession that is being faced by different countries. I'm not going to speak for all countries, because there are some who are thriving in these difficult economic times. So violence is political, and unfortunately, when there are political issues or challenges such as economic recessions, global pandemic, or a public health crisis, war, And then elections, it's almost always minority groups who suffer. And in the case of our research, we saw that the first line of suffering is, in the context of elections specifically, a woman politician. And it's a woman politician who has even not been cleared for vying as a candidate. They could just be speaking about, I'm interested, I'm just, Jocelyn Dumas for president, I'm just thinking about it, I'm just, let me see. And you fall victim, you fall on the front line of abuse to deter you from participating in active politics, to deter women from even considering any position of power, and the quest of power sharing to also dissuade other men from sharing their power with women. And in our context here in Africa, unfortunately, cultural and gender norms continue to shape how women and other minorities are abused. And as you can see, as I've said, violence is political. It starts with power models. And then the other thing we've seen again on economic models, where when there's an economic crisis, like we are seeing in different countries, our governments, our banks, our businesses not thriving, there are different forms of frustrations from, from intimate partner violence, where some partners may be earning more or thriving, or others just being frustrated from some of the general outlooks or economic outlook in their countries and on their businesses. And then at society and community level, violence coming out where, there's non-consensual image sharing of different individuals, both women and men, where we know our content creators, our journalists, we know our very able, youngsters or Gen Zs who are thriving or using different content creation models. Their images are shared without their consent. All this because of an economic basis where you're earning a lot because you're online. I will come and interfere with your economic opportunity. And you will not continue to earn because this is your lifeline. This is where you rely to make your bread. The area, of course, all based on misogyny, as I had pointed out, is on the public health crisis. We have already passed the COVID-19 crisis, but we know there was Ebola, and in some other regions, there are other concerns that they're experiencing, which, ends up with, if I use an example of Kenya, where I'm based and where I'm sitting, when the COVID-19 pandemic struck, I know we are repeating old narratives, but it's very important that I bring this nexus. It's a woman who received because she was patient zero, it's a woman's livelihood, her way of life, and her profile that ended up being exposed online. People went to the lengths of even visiting their home, take photos of who they are and saying, you're bringing this pandemic or disease to us, opposed to using information that's readily available from the WHO verified website with other information sources. So you can see misogyny, violence, and gender disinformation really is a very critical area or crisis that needs to be tackled. And that's when you asked about data poverty. I speak from a point of our platforms. The model they use is quite discriminatory because they highly rely on data from us as African women who are the higher victims of violence to be able to shape and to be able to improve their services and their digital platforms. Whereas they're able to design, they're able to create algorithms that promote safe use of their tools, safe use of their digital media. And hey, this is a challenge to any techie who is on this call, who is an African techie. We are really, really looking forward to using African-made social media platforms that also center our own experiences and center our own challenges and how to also mitigate them very, very fast. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Irene. We all the techies on here, please, let's get to work. Now, which brings me to my next panelist that I want to speak to, Pamela. You've heard everything that all the ladies have said, and the gentleman, of course. Now, I want to know how No More is working for survivors globally, and what are some of the themes you're seeing in different parts of the world? Pamela?
Hi. Yes, thank you so much, Jocelyn, for all of you being here with us today, and yourself for being such a great supporter. I think one of the things that we do is trying to put information out there that is easy, available, open source for people to grab those and learn from each other. An example is this tech conference, right? It seemed like a crazy feat, but we've started, we made sure we started in Australia time and we're going to finish in LATAM. And the idea is not only to say that, this is a global conference, but really to get voices from everywhere, most likely to prove a point that all of us are suffering from similar issues, right? Yeah. There might be different contexts, but when it comes to tech and digital abuse, the front is very similar because we're all sharing the same platform. So this is very important. It's very important to give voice to activists wherever they are. And and this is for many issues, primarily because, as was said before, gender-based violence is political. And let's face it, let's say it. And the reason is because if it wasn't, we'll be quicker to find solutions for it. Yeah. Right. And it doesn't matter, right? This becomes a political ball that is thrown by, elections, new governments, etc. Just to give you an example, and I haven't said anything about it, but I will at the end of the day. One of our last conversations is with Argentina, and it's about media and journalists. And just a couple of days ago, after we done the interview, one of the journalists lost her job because they're a gender journalist. So we're all under attack for saying the truth, for speaking, for some people easier at some moments, and for, in other places, right? And it's interesting to see how this thing, this wasn't an issue in Argentina, 5 years ago. They had a very kind of supportive government towards gender issues. So it's important to learn others because you never know in what side of history you're going to find yourself in. Yeah. So coming back to the question, putting information out there. I guess the other thing that you saw us also in the process of doing was to, in 2021, we established a global directory on domestic and sexual violence for survivors everywhere in the world. I think at this point we have 3 countries that are not included for safety reasons of organizations, really. But it came up to 2021 to have a global resource that was accurate in terms of domestic and sexual violence when we have a globalized world for a couple of decades already. And this is where, again, we come to that kind of political thing. All of these things are political because we just haven't done and put the emphasis that we have on them. Now, some of the other things very quickly that we do is we try to pick on new topics, new concerns, immediately try to do webinars and kind of just showcase that information. Some of the things that we're seeing from organizations is it's really hard to keep up with technology. Technology is always evolving. If you think about it, right? And now 10 years ago, 8 years ago, we were starting to deal with social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, etc. And now we're talking about AI and deep fakes, and it's another complete level of, so it's hard, like once you're starting to kind of get settled, let's say with, this is the way that we're going to deal with something, new technology emerges, right? And it is hard for the non-for-profit sector to keep up. And we see that where frontline services just cannot afford to have a tech specialist or to have somebody that, understands all the ways to kind of keep safe. So we seem to be always a step behind. And there is a lot of conversation on making sure that we can future-proof legislation, future-proof services when it comes to that. And I guess the kind of the last thing is what I said before in terms of that a lot of these services are, a lot of these issues that are being seen globally are very similar because some of these tech, actors are the same. Yeah. And what we are starting to see also is a movement from governments to start getting more serious about digital violence. Some are further, some are a little bit behind. It depends on the continent. You'll see, who's leading. But then the other thing is that tech platforms and companies are starting to look at safety more seriously than they were 5, 6 years ago, because they're becoming the front line of reporting. Many women not wanting to report to the police because they don't trust it, but going to a platform, a tech platform, to report that they've been abused. So yes, that's the bigger picture from our side.
Thank you. But before we continue with the questions, I think we have some Q&As from our audience. Maybe we should look at them. An anonymous attendee, and the person says, how can we use technology to excavate human rights? Something like the contract tracing app in Sky app with Vodafone type of technology.
Well, I mean, I think that as much as I don't know the Sky app, so I can't comment on that, but I can just speak more generally that as much as tech provides new avenues for abuse and disempowerment by women, I think that there are definitely potentials for women to use these tools for their own empowerment, for information, for connection, for building community, for income generation. So I think that it's important to highlight those uses of technology for positive good. But I also like what Pamela spoke about in terms of tech being more responsible and tech companies being more responsible. I think that, if they are, it's also because they're really on the hot seats, and they're really seen as avenues where a lot of this abuse can thrive, that is channeled through. So I do think that it's very important for women, for Africans, to really be able to shift from being just consumers of technology to actually creating technology that is rooted in our own experiences and our own needs as well.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Thank you for this. I hope this answers the anonymous attendee's question somewhat. And then I think we have one more from Laura, and she's saying sharing information is important, and with the internet being a huge level of fake information, can we create safer fact-based informational pages to share worldwide?
Fact-checking is a very important piece of process when you look at information integrity. However, different regulations on data governance and digital governance have made it possible for it to be done fast in different regions. When you look at the region of Africa or this region, we still lag behind on measures or governance structures that will support for fast verification of information and fact checking. That is why our political scene and elections is rife with a lot of misinformation, disinformation, and hate speech. So it's very important that when it's almost individual based, how the model and the design of some of these tools that we use and platforms that we use leave the onus to us as users of these tools and platforms to really ensure that we've fact-checked before sharing any information, which is part of the cyber hygiene movement that I see most of us are actively engaging on. Many journalists in Africa are actually, some have received very credible and proper training on fact-checking, and that is why some of the media houses are very, very fast in responding to verify some news and information. So it's important to work hand in hand with media and regulatory authorities so that we can have proper governance regimes that govern speedy fact-checking models and also resource fact-checking authorities or fact-checking individuals to really support with fact-checking work. Thank you.
Thank you, Irene. So you've answered one of my legal questions that I needed to ask you, and you've pretty much summed it all up. We're going to the legal framework and reporting, okay? And you spent a part of your career examining human rights and tech policy. So you did mention the legal data protection framework where you're from. And the question I want to know is it working, or is there something else, or do we need to add a little bit more to it to make this thing work?
I mean, unfortunately, some of the models that have been taken up, I don't know why today I'm sounding so pessimistic. I'm never like this, I'm sorry. But the models that have been taken up for governance in data and digital governance in our region have borrowed extensively from the global minority, the global north. There is opportunity to build our own nascent and our own regulation for data governance. However, also piggybacking on best practices and best models from other regions, which of course is almost always welcome. So with that, then we are facing a challenge of, harmonizing and ratification and implementation of, for instance, at the AU level, if you look at the Africa Union data strategy, which is and has been in place for a while now, that countries have been, reporting against. And at policy level, there is the Malabo Convention on Cybersecurity, which has now been superseded by the AU Data Policy Framework, which is actually a very active framework, which has been guiding member states at the African Union level to implement some of the data protection measures that will speak for African experiences and for African businesses. If we consider even the Africa Free Continental Trade Agreement, that's a mouthful. So work that is really on data governance frameworks is to build knowledge, research, and use cases around it that can support citizens to understand how to effectively protect themselves when it comes to privacy, and privacy does not mean secrecy, so we need to be careful with that. My colleague is always very clear when speaking about issues to do with data protection. The work that is for us as civil society and civic tech actors is to build modules that will enable children, our sisters, our grandparents to understand really how they can share or how they can use and protect themselves when it comes to data. The last thing I can speak on this and just the human rights mechanisms also all together is that there is opportunity to also report on the status of implementation of these national data protection mechanisms at the Africa Commission and on human and people's rights. So it can build momentum for civil society actors to start programming on these issues. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Irene. It's good. It's good you mentioned that there's so much you're doing, but there's a lot more to be done. And it's not just up to you, but we all have to get involved, which is something that it resonates really well with me. Thank you. Now, Ore, my next question is to you. I beg your pardon. Now, you did mention earlier on when we spoke that a lot of these women report their perpetrators and they are actually taken on, and some of them do get the justice they deserve or they've wanted. So there is an existing legal data protection framework in Nigeria. But with everything being said, are the women or the girls or the people that are being abused, are they even reporting? Because you did mention something about the stigmatization, the shame that comes with it. So with all these legal frameworks that have been set up in Nigeria in place, are the women even coming forward to reports based on stigma, culture, the fact that, the odds are really against you even being a girl child or a woman in certain parts of the continent?
So I would say that in general, it can be hard to know how many women are reporting vis-a-vis the number of women who are facing abuse online or violence online. But I think it's safe to theorize that it's very low numbers. But from what we can see, a lot of women are not stepping forward to report, any kind of violence. I think we have to look at, and there are different factors that could affect this. We look at the intersectionality of women. So maybe women vis-a-vis their culture, women vis-a-vis her religion, women vis-a-vis her educational background. And all these different intersections will affect the way that a woman thinks, and also the opportunities that she has, and also maybe the kind of platform she has for people to listen to her. So maybe a young woman who's from a maybe poor, socioeconomically poor background may, number one, not feel as empowered to step forward as a woman who is maybe more educated and just naturally has been raised in a more confident way. So we have to look at that. Those things really play a huge role in whether women will come forward or not. Then there's also the aspect of if they think that they have done something wrong. So there is also the difficulty in identifying what is, I guess, an actionable offense. Someone did this to me online and made me feel that way, but is that enough for me to step forward or not? So there is a difficulty in also identifying at what point do I need to say something to someone? And like I mentioned as well, the shame as well is really strong. But we do have some women who are stepping forward. We have some women who don't have an option because maybe it's already out there. We have some very prominent cases of some women, female singers who were being blackmailed, and they were told that they had to pay some money, otherwise some intimate images of them will be put out there. And they just put out the image, they
owned it.
Yeah, they owned it and they put out the image. But not every woman is going to be able to do that. So I think that takes a certain level of position. But we do have the frameworks, like I mentioned, but the frameworks are not comprehensive. So we really also have a lot of work to do in terms of amending the legal frameworks and also making sure that the penalties match the crime as well. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Ore. Now, Abbas, what do you have to say to this? I mean, I know that you did mention, is Abbas with us still?
Yes.
Abbas? Good. Abbas, so earlier on you mentioned all the issues, especially in the North with revenge porn and, with these young ladies. Now, the question again, and speaking of the legal framework, how are we encouraging these girls to come up and speak up? And what is being done to the perpetrators of such in the North?
Yeah, I think the problem we have is the rate of literacy among these girls, the victims themselves. Like Ori rightly mentioned, they sometimes find it very difficult to distinguish between when is the time to say something. And we have this issue of the culture and tradition around the place to, in one way or the other, impact the action that is supposed to be taken. For example, in the wake of the camel nude pictures, there was a debate around the girls are the cost of the issue. I mean, they were being labeled, and there were attempts to even say that no action should be taken against the guy who leaked the pictures. So these are some of the issues. So I think what we need to do is to strengthen the legal framework, let the girls know, be able to educate them to distinguish between when it is time to say something, and then enforcing the legal framework such that tradition, patriarchy, and all those things doesn't affect or influence those duty bearers who are supposed to do something or take action against issues like this.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Abbas. Thank you. Now, Irene, quickly before we move on, you are deeply committed to advocating for a feminist internet. Now, with everything again on the legal framework, are the women coming up? Are they speaking up? And how effective has your feminist internet been since you started doing that?
Thank you for that. I'll speak on Africa-based research as the tool for change that we have used as our sole approach. The thing we need to do is create evidence, and particularly on this political violence, let me put it that way. And what we've seen is that there has been a yearning by different actors to understand, what role they play, what more can be done. But again, I started by saying we have not yet really, all of us, as a collective, we've really not focused on the perpetrator side of things, which is, I think, in my own opinion, where we need a bit of resources, particularly on research, to also see how the public health scene or the public health community can also come in to offer their own knowledge, and particularly for the African context, to help us build a better internet. Because you see, what happens, Jocelyn, is we will deal with survivors, we'll create programs for survivors, we will speak to government on legislation, either a bit on response and not much on prevention of violence, but we will never address the root cause to the best of our knowledge, because one, technology issues and the technology field altogether is a bit technical and requires technical expertise, which, in my opinion, a lot of women and minorities who are the first victims are not, are not technical experts on this sphere. There are lower numbers of women and minorities as experts in Africa. And then two, I feel strongly that, there is opportunity for civil society actors who have been now programming on other issues such as education, public health, agriculture, to really find ways to integrate the role of technology and how we can improve the sector, so that the more technology is coming out, the more it is inclusive, the more it is a reflection of some of the good things we want or we have in our society today. And then lastly, to close it off, our research has also shown us that because of the technical language and the technical expertise that comes with technology and data science conversations, there is an opportunity to simplify this using different tools. And we have, and I'm going to share the links immediately, we have created games to speak about these different issues, such as fake news, which is, gender disinformation. We have also created games to speak about digital safety from an African perspective. You're shopping in Nigeria online. Who is a Yahoo boy? They will come at you. So there are different ways to handle these kinds of online scams and online incidences. And we've also created a card game which speaks about data and can help you understand what and where is your data, to the differences between privacy and secrecy, because in the African society, we really treasure privacy. So we need to understand privacy from data protection or data governance perspective. So those are some of the things we have done as an institution together with our partners. And we have been collaborating with governments as well. And we have seen there's a very huge appetite. We hope people will align in the next, in the next few years, so that we can have our own models that look like us and are for us as Africans.
Thank you, Irene. Cynthia, in Cameroon, I wanted to know if you have any legal frameworks, like we've discussed in the earlier discussion, with the rest of the ladies.
So in Cameroon, there is still a lot of a knowledge gap, and permit me call it a kind of complacency around tech facilitator abuse. Deeply because it's not something that is talked about very much in Cameroon. We've not gotten to that point where government or legislation feels the need or sees the need to be able to lay down tools and mechanisms to be able to address this. Because of course, the general notion is that women who are using tech should be able to accept the fact that if you're getting on a social media platform, you should be ready for what comes with it. And that it's normal to expect that a man would want to make advances at you, or that, they call it's a horse that's a jungle you should be able to be ready to venture into when you decide to get into it. So it's the digital life, So, and there's a lot of confusion around, if I am a victim of this kind of violence, what do I do? Who do I talk to? What do I need? It's just enough to get an Android phone or a smartphone and you're on social media, and it gives everybody the access to be on that platform. But the knowledge gap about how to go about this, who should I talk to? Like you would quickly run to the police if you had a civil case, but now you're online, you don't even see the people behind all this tech. And from my experience, we as civil society actors who are working to empower women have the mandate to provide a kind of holistic response to the issues that affect women, and that includes tech facilitated abuse. But we as responders don't have the capacity. We are all just also battling in this social media space and trying to be able to strengthen each other. We don't have the capacity. Like I've heard Irene and Ore mention already, that it's a lot of technicalities which women are still struggling to get a kind of education, and they talk less of technological education that permits them to understand all of this. So I think in Cameroon, we are still at that level where even civil society organizations that are working to empower women do not have the adequate skills and knowledge to be able to respond to this kind of violence that women are facing. But it's on the rise on a daily basis. And even those of us who are in these spaces have not been able to build the resilience that is needed to be able to even provide the kind of support that women need. So this is where we are at the moment. I remember a young lady who left an abusive relationship, left her husband's home, and was trying to pick up a business. She set up an online business. She was running it, and this man, we don't know if it's him, would use a fake account to go under all her business pages to say, oh, you abandoned your husband, you're a wicked woman, now you're miserable, go back and take care of your husband because he took care of you. And he was trolling her all over her social media platforms. And then we tried to find solutions. How are we able to unravel this mystery man? And then we got to a tech guy who told us we needed lots and lots of money to be able to track that account. So where do women get the money to be able to follow this solution? If it's this, where do you even start from? Where do you have the money, and who do you go to? So it's a complex, it's very complex. And I've heard the rest of the speakers echo the fact that it's not the same. It's the same that we're all experiencing this kind of violence, but at different levels, and the realities are different depending on the status, the strata, the level of education of women. And that's what we are seeing, because the kind of violence that I experience online, because of how vocal I am in the work that I do, it's not the kind of violence that a young girl who's just scroll into social media and want to put up a post experiences. And then we've not spoken enough about the mental breakdown that comes with this. Nobody sees it. And people do not validate the pain and the hurt that you go through when you become a victim, because they're like, why? A parent will quickly tell the daughter, why were you on social media? The solution is just not to be on social media. The solution is just not to have an Android or a smartphone. Just stay away from that space. And these are the vulnerabilities that we've not spoken about as women as much. And they made me stretch a little bit. I was in a meeting with high-level women who working with the UN, and they were sharing their vulnerabilities about how she went online to make her HIV status known. She was like, I'm living with HIV, and how people dragged her son and her daughter for having a mother who was HIV positive. And she was like, I regret ever taking my activism to social media because I couldn't protect my children from the pain. So even if we are building resilience, how are we building the resilience of the people who are connected to us, who are loved ones, who would suffer the consequences of this kind of abuse? So these are just my reflections.
I think that, thank you so much, Cynthia. I think that this is something that we need to really think about, the mental health of the people, the victims, as well as their family members and people around them. Is very, very important, because a lot of things that happen to me, even on social media, being a public person, I know affects my daughter, affects my mother, and how do we even, you're dealing with your own mental issues. What do you do with your mother, your child, the people that are closest to you, who love you, and they're actually affected by some of these bullying on the internet, cyberbullying? This is really something that we definitely need to throw more light on and know some solutions to this. Thank you so much, Cynthia. Now, tech for good. This question goes to Ore. Your work at WTech is about improving lives with tech. Now, how do you do this? And what is the impact on the girls' lives? It's off the back of all these issues, even with the mental health, right? So I want to know what you do and the impact that has on girls' lives with WTech.
All right, thank you. So the work we do at WTech, primarily, we want girls and women to be confident users of technology and digital tools, to be able to benefit from them It started off with my story and how I was really able to find my space and my platform online and also generate an income. But I think beyond the income, really, it was about having a voice online. And I felt it was important for other girls to have this as well. And the more research I did, the more I realized that there were so few women in this space working in tech. And really, you can't be what you can't see. If you don't see other women using technology, then you're less likely to want to use it. If you don't see women working in tech, then you are less likely to think of it as a career option. So we started off wanting girls to be confident about tech and ultimately, hopefully, also pursue careers in technology. And so we do that through a variety of programs. We have a residential camp every summer. And so for 2 weeks, the girls go through intensive. So these are girls who are between the ages of 11 to 17. So they're the age where, you know, they're still wide open, curious. They haven't taken on too many of society's messages about what they can or cannot do. And so they're really going through engaging technology and workshops. We broadened it from just tech to STEM. So they're going through workshops, they're learning, and we're also exposing them to mentors as well. So women who are working in STEM are speaking to them, are facilitating. So it's just opening up their mind about what is possible for them. We don't have every girl who attends our program going into STEM, but I mean, so far we have had 67.7 of our beneficiaries, you know, states that they are on the track to pursue a STEM degree. Nice. Because of WTech. We have like another 50% who are making an income because of the knowledge and the skills they got from WTech. But beyond that, we have all the girls have stated that they are more confident in themselves. This is outside of tech. They're more confident and aware of who they are, and then also better able to use technology. Like I said at the beginning, technology is ubiquitous and it can be used for good or bad. So it's important that, you know, girls and women are really able to claim their power and leverage on these tools for their own social and economic and political empowerment. So that's what we do at WTech.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Irene. Irene, I'm coming to you. Do you see good tech? And how does this tech improve the lives of women and girls and reduce violence against women and girls?
I mean, we are here because of technology. We are speaking, we're able to communicate from different locations. We cannot erase the good that technology, both some of the traditional technologies we used, and we see that, you know, it's already past, like our landlines, our radios, and now to smart technologies that we are using, both the traditional and, you know, generative AI. We are seeing the benefits for me outweigh the cons, and especially in promotion of gender equality, because I believe if the product designers or some of the tech designers are able to take some of the data and information about minority experiences, women's experiences, global South experience, and infuse when building some of these technologies, or, you know, infuse to make better policies at government level, then we'll see them working to the promotion of gender equality. If you look at our education curriculums as we progress over the years in Africa, we've seen some of them integrating cyber education, digital education. I know there are plans, or I know there are governments that are conducting digital refresher courses for their public service. I know at heart, you know, the African governments were also really prioritizing connectivity, or what we call internet connectivity, by, you know, reducing taxes, reducing the costs on purchasing digital technologies such as smart devices, smartphones, and so forth. So I believe it's a work in progress, and I believe we all have a role to play to ensure that, you know, we use them safely. We promote the next generation to also use them ethically and safely. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Now, I know that I went through a period where I needed to speak to someone desperately. And one of the things that we are told in these parts is, you're afraid to even share your problems for fear of being mocked at or the shame, like Ore has said. Now, this is to Cynthia. One of the things that I did with the internet was I found somebody that was far away, a psychologist, and I was able to speak to her about some of the thoughts that I was having, because I just didn't want to do an interface with anyone like locally. And that really helped. I spoke about issues that I was having, and I spoke to somebody and it helped. And I used the internet to find a psychologist or a shrink to have these discussions with. Now, I want to know how you see tech and how it can be used to discuss healthy relationships among women and girls. Like Irene said, we're all communicating now from different parts of the world, and we're able to come together to speak on issues and find good resolutions to the issues. And so I want to know how, especially in Cameroon, how tech can be used to discuss healthy relationships between women and girls. Case in point, like what I did,
Yeah. Jocelyn, I always say that technology is, for me, we call it a necessary evil. Like, we just can't do without it.
Yeah.
The pros and the cons, but I cannot be able to explain or to describe how much it has been helpful to the work that we do.
Yeah.
Especially, and I like the niche that you've touched on about building a community of supporters.
Yeah.
Young women and women who are able to hold each other's hands. And I think we saw this very useful even in the time of COVID, when we realized that we could be very distant from each other while being very close to each other.
Yeah.
And we used this very much because it was a time when women were going through a lot. We have not been able to enumerate the impact of COVID on women's mental health, on women's economic empowerment, and all of that. And we used this space at Mother of Hope. We used the social media. We used tech to be able to organize webinars and create spaces, virtual spaces, where you would just wake up in the morning and come and drop it maybe in your WhatsApp group, and like, I'm feeling down today, I need somebody to talk to. And you have a sister come up and say, I'm available to talk to you if it's going to help.
Yeah.
With even if in a very deeply religious background, like where we're like in Cameroon, where women believe that they could have even prayer groups. We've created platforms where women just come together and pray for each other, and to recreate that kind of support for each other. And I cannot be able to explain how helpful it has been. And then it breaks the silence around this, because instead of shying to say that I can't share it to somebody, that you're not alone and that your sister next door is probably experiencing the same thing. And it creates that support system. And I think that women go through a lot. Working with women from the time when I was in secondary school up to now, I keep asking, what have we not seen as women? And we cannot be able to remove the place of the support that we provide for each other, which the digital space is giving us. It's also giving us a lot of voice. People have been able to create YouTube channels. Women have been able to create YouTube channels to share their opinions and ideas, just from getting strength and inspiration from other women. And that's how we are building the digital resilience that I saw one of the participants asking a question in the question box, like, how do we build digital resilience? It's by inspiring each other. It's by having that support system that permits you to be able to be yourself, notwithstanding that it's like there's always somebody on social media out to get you. They will be there, but they can't silence us if we're supporting each other. So we've done a lot of this, and it's really, really, really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good, Cynthia. That's really nice. All right. How can technology be tailored to address connectivity and accessibility? And how can there be tools to help victims of gender-based violence? This is a question to Ore, yes.
Okay, so the second part about addressing gender-based violence, I think that there needs to be a holistic approach. Beyond the tools is just one part. But beyond the tools, we need to make sure that the other pieces are in place in terms of having appropriate legal frameworks, in terms of making sure that there's proper enforcement, because you could have legal frameworks but no enforcement. Then also making sure that there are adequate penalties when people are brought to book. But then in terms of the tools, I mean, there are ways that tools can be used in so many ways. Reporting, so tools can be used for reporting. And we already see maybe some social media platforms are used for this. But then there are also apps, and there are apps that I know of here in Nigeria that have been developed by Nigerian groups, organizations for reporting violence, for providing information like the steps. And so if this has happened to you, this is what you can do. This is a number you can call. This is an email address you can reach out to. And so information is provided. Then also being able to map as well, because sometimes, you know, you find that there might be a hotspot of violence, maybe especially in terms of physical violence and maybe like street harassment. So there are different tools that have been developed. And some are focused on very small geographic regions so that they're really able to provide that context that the people in that area need. So off the top of my head, in Nigeria, we have Report GBV that was developed by the Federal Ministry of Women Affairs. We have another one, Quorum, that was developed by a nonprofit, and another one, Kotorum, that has been developed. Then we have Safe City, which was developed in India, but is now, I think there are versions of the app used across the world to track and to map areas of violence. Then the first question, I think, was about how tech can address issues of connectivity.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so I think that, so one reason that a lot of women were not going online initially was because of lack of access to the devices. So whether that was a computer or a mobile device, we see research that shows that very few women actually own their own mobile device or have access to a smartphone. And if they have access to a smartphone, then they don't necessarily have access to internet, to data on it, because data costs, especially on the continent, are fairly high, especially compared to the rest of the world. So, I mean, those larger issues that need to be addressed in terms of having access to the infrastructure and to the internet. But then when we talk about actually, you have the tech and you want to get online, there are, so for instance, Facebook has a way where you can use Facebook and with no data. So you don't see any of the images on Facebook, but you're able to see the text. So we have different platforms that have provided that kind of facility. We also had, I think it was Facebook as well, also provided free Wi-Fi in different parts of Lagos, and I'm sure probably they did that in other parts of the world. So we have to remember that even though it seems like a great thing, ultimately these companies are driven by profit, so they're also thinking about their bottom line. So the more people they can get online, the more people they can get using their platform. So that's the flip to it. They always say if something is free, then you know you're the products, the product that they're selling. So a lot of women, girls, younger users may not have that understanding and just basically take the tech at face value, and they're providing their data, they're providing their content, which these companies are actually making money from. So it is important that we're always thinking about, you know, that flip side. But there are tools that you can. So some places may provide free Wi-Fi. A tool like WhatsApp, you know, you can use that usually with no data or very low data anyway. And we use that in my organization during COVID times. We had an after-school club. So we would go to schools to teach each week. But with COVID, we were not able to do that. So we had to online. And initially, we tried using Zoom for the online classes. That didn't work because a lot of the girls did not have any kind of access, but they did have phones, or they could borrow their mother's, brother's, father's phone. And so we moved to WhatsApp, and we use WhatsApp, and we put videos on WhatsApp, we put text on WhatsApp, we recorded voice notes on WhatsApp. So that's fine in an area with a space where you have low, limited bandwidth for connectivity.
Yeah, that's really commendable. That's really nice that you guys did that. Thank you for doing that for the woman and for the girl. It's very important. Thank you. Now, Cynthia, do you have any comments with regards to this particular question? How technology solutions can be tailored to address connectivity and accessibility? And can there be any tools to help victims of gender-based violence?
Well, I think that even in my context, we still have a problem with access to technology, a huge gap in terms of access, because it's still very practical that in some areas in Cameroon, we don't have access to the internet. And yeah, and that's the poverty levels for women and girls is really for raw and vulnerable in rural communities, and for vulnerable girls does not permit them to even access as much as a phone. So, but then these vulnerable women and girls are victims of violence, and sometimes even the backlash of violence that comes from technology, which they are not even directly involved in. So I think that one of the things that we can do in terms of solutions is also to really be able to break the poverty line. I think that it all ties down, the feminization of poverty is something that the impact is very much far reaching. And so if we can break the poverty line, especially for women, then they can be able to have access first to technology and its advantages and its opportunities.
Yeah.
And then in terms of addressing gender-based violence, I think that we also need to be able to build resilience for women who, who are using technology, either in their spaces of work or for their businesses. For the different things that women do, is to really be able to first of all build the kind of digital resilience that I mentioned earlier. Yeah. Because there would always be people who are out there wanting to perpetrate violence. It's something we can't say that we can totally eradicate. There are always malicious people. And so if women are going to be able to take advantage of these spaces and to be able to thrive in these spaces, then we should be able to build resilience. Resilience that builds your ability to be able to close your ears to the noise and focus on the work that you're doing. Yeah. And then I think it's also something to hold tech companies very much accountable, because it's not about just providing the services or providing the technology. It's about being able to protect the people who are using it. I think that over the years, tech companies have just maybe distanced themselves from the impacts of that are coming from the usage of technology. And I think they are predominantly those who are able to respond to the issues around tech abuse. We should be able to have some way to go to report and know that somebody can do something about this. That way it encourages women to talk about it and reduces the tendency to get into a depression. I've seen women get into depression and even attempt suicide because of social media. So we need to know that it's not just an abstract space, and that there are mechanisms, there are people, actual people that we can go to and have solutions to our problems. I think if we take it from that angle, then, and this is really for us as civil society, those of us who are mostly tech oriented in our activism, to be able to push these companies to take up responsibility for as much money that they are making in these spaces, to be able to protect the users. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. That was a very strong submission. Thank you. Okay, so moving right on. Irene, how can collaboration between African governments, tech companies, and NGOs improve the prevention and response to tech abuse and gender-based violence across the continent?
Wow, I'll start with some guidelines that platforms, they themselves put out for this year's elections, for the 74 elections. I forget the link, maybe one of you can look for it. I think it was led by Meta, Google, X, Apple. They all committed to, of course, algorithmic designs and data sharing models that will improve and not bring more opportunities for misinformation, disinformation, and hate speech. It's online, if I remember the link or the name. I think it's a manifesto or a guideline, something. Please be on the lookout. So there's already commitment at private sector level, because let's be honest, platforms are the private sector, and they always find ways to comply with policies and the law, and they almost always get laws to also be in their favor, because of course money moves the world. So it's important to acknowledge that they also fund research. These platforms also fund many scholarship programs at university level for data scientists, for engineers alike. So it's important that we create systems that will promote Africans to take up these opportunities so that they can make change from within, so that they can be able to influence power sharing models from within, so that by the time we are speaking to our governments, there is a possibility of influencing using our own narratives and using our own experiences. So we need to find models that can almost always improve our experiences from, the platform design level, and also putting the private sector, the platforms themselves to account, and also finding ways to bring and make the government sit at the table without making it a by the way or a case of, it's optional. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Irene. Cynthia, what I wanted to know as well from you is that what strategies can be deployed to create digital platforms and tools accessible in the local African language to ensure a wider reach and impact combating gender-based violence. So again, language barrier, because most of these things are in English. So what are some of the things that we can do to create platforms accessible in local languages to ensure a wider reach and impact in combating gender-based violence?
All right, thank you, Jocelyn, for that. I think this is also very real within my context, because gender-based violence doesn't know culture, no language. It happens to diverse groups of women. And I work quite in a very diversified landscape where we have Muslim women, and in Cameroon, we have over 230 tribes. So you can imagine how many different languages we speak. And and mostly these women are not educated, so you can't say that speaking in English all the time would work. And then Cameroon is bilingual, so we have French speakers, we have English speakers. So it's really diverse, but violence is happening to every woman, no matter where she's coming from. And so I'll share some of the approaches that we have used. Is that we have been able to develop tools that are translated in the different languages that people speak. Especially women from rural communities who have their tribal languages that they understand, or the Muslim women who speak, the Fulani and the other kinds of languages that women use. We try to develop, sometimes we do videos where we are trying to explain the different signs of GBV, how it affects women, and how they can be able to break the silence, and it's translated. In other communities, we do sketches. We could just go into a community and do a sketch. We get, those who are educated in the community, we give them the concept, develop a sketch or a play, a role play in their traditional vernacular, and play it out in churches, in traditional groups, in women's social groups, so that they're able to get the message. And we're using, and we've seen that it works very much to be able to, because first of all, you speak a person's language, you capture the person's attention, the person's willing to listen. Because most cultures have taught women that anything that says that you should, retaliate against a man is contrary to their gender role as women. And so we've seen women themselves resisting help, because they think that we're coming to, break their homes, or to make them to no longer be submissive to their partners and things like that. So we need to find entry points. And one of the entry points is language, to be able to get your message across. So these are some of the practical things that we do. Sometimes we sing it even in songs, coin this thing in songs, and then it gets translated. And these women sing them in their groups so that the message sticks, and they're able to break the silence around intimate partner violence, which is one of the campaigns that we've done very elaborately in Cameroon. We went to over 30 social groups where, because we just have situations where we have women who put little groups together to either, contribute money to support somebody who is bereaved. And so when you go to those kind of groups, and make sure that you talk to them about intimate partner violence, so that it reaches even in the churches. Because sometimes religion is also tolerating this.
Absolutely.
Just too many, the nexus, there are too many nexuses that come into play around gender-based violence that, exasperate it or make women to remain in the shackles of gender-based violence, using even the gospel and using religion. So we're not leaving any stone unturned. I think that's my contribution to that question.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you so much. Now, in conclusion, I would like to speak to each and every panelist on here. As we wrap this session, what is the good news coming out of this discussion today? And how can we take this forward? We've said a lot, and I want to know what's happened from here on now. What are some of the things that we're going to be doing to move this conversation even forward?
So I think number one, the fact that we're all here and we're all passionate about this topic and it means so much to us and we are brought together by technology. I think that shows the power and the potential or the opportunity that technology can provide, that we can have people coming from different areas and sharing their work and their experiences. And we can see that, you know, despite the different cultural contexts, there's still so much similarity in terms of the scope and the depth of the problem that we're working towards. So yeah. I think it's important to keep speaking. I think it's important to keep pushing for appropriate legal frameworks. I think it's important to keep encouraging women to use tech. I mean, we're going to continue to do that and show them the strategies where they can use it safely and help them understand that for the foreseeable future, there will still be bad players and bad actors on the digital landscape using these tools and perpetrating or trying to perpetrate violence against them. But then they have a certain power in also their ability to use the tech for their own economic, their own social, and their own political empowerment, that they can amplify their voice using tech.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ore. Irene, how do we continue with this narrative? How do we move this forward? I mean, what is the good news coming out of this particular session?
Yeah, I'll still insist on creating narratives and shaping narratives, particularly by African civil society actors. There is a need to continue doing more research in this area. Trust me, we've not even scratched the surface yet. If you look at the challenges and issues that minorities and young people are going through, there is also opportunity to continue calling for accountability from our governments so that they can be able to put pressure to the private sector, particularly the platforms, to build better and to make better tools that serve us better. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Cynthia?
I have already learned a lot from this space. And I think what we can do is learning best practice from each other, probably reach out to each other, because now I'm not a tech expert. I have more of a community approach to these things, but I've heard policies, I've heard laws, and I've heard how it's working. I probably want to reach out to Irene or to Ore to say, okay, how can I be able to accelerate this in Cameroon further to see how we can press for these better laws? I think that's what tech does for us, that it gives us a community that we can always fall back on, right? So now you have this network that if you want to push something, I could say, all right, maybe or it can be willing to come to Cameroon to push some advocacy for us, and so we can take it up from there. So I think this is really a good start. It's a good place to be in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. Okay, Pamela.
I think let's work with our young people. They are, the ones that have being born and using this technology all the time, and if we don't use the opportunity to get the very best from them, then I think we'll take many more years to find the solutions to this issue. So yes, let's go to our youngsters. That's my call.
Yeah, thank you so much, Pamela. And I think that empathy is very important in all of this. Let's have a listening ear to anyone who's going through whatever without already judging them. And, I think as women, we need to continue to support each other and not blame or victim shame or blame anyone. Because a lot of times when some of these things happen, the people that are the hardest on the victims are the women. There's a lot of things that I feel like I've experienced. So if you're experiencing it, it's not a big deal, but I think that we need to encourage everyone to speak up who is going through whatever they're going through, so that we'll all come together as a strong force and find a solution to this. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Irene, Cynthia, Abbas, Ore, and of course, Pamela, for your contributions. And I want to say thank you to everyone who attended and listened. I hope that we've all taken home something, and we're all going to be on the lookout for each other, especially the women and the young girls. Thank you guys so much. Now, the next session will take part in 5 minutes, from bites to broken hearts, the role of technology in mental health and suicide. All right, guys, thank you. Thank you so much for being here and attending this.